Major League Baseball's dream series of the 1970s came very close to occurring in the 1973 season. The Cincinnati Reds, long before they won not long before, a couple of years before, they won two straight, were in the midst of a great season with 99 wins, but they faced the upstart New York Mets in the National League Championship Series, and the predictions of the Mets being swept were thrown aside very quickly. They entered the series against the Reds with an 82-79 regular season record, and the Reds were 99-63. Now, the early October series goes down in history, of course, for the infamous brawl in the fifth inning of the third game. We'll get into that in a second. Now, this series played between the Mets and the Reds. It went from October 6th to 10th, 73. New York won the series 3-2 and advanced to the World Series, where they lost to the Oakland Athletics, which was the second of three straight title wins for Oakland. The Mets set a then record for lowest win percentage by pennant winner, finishing the campaign with an 82-79 record. However, most of the campaign was plagued by the injury jinx to their key players. In September, they finally got healthy and just in time for the playoffs, as their starting staff was also strong. The Mets' victory has gone down as one of the greatest upsets in MLB history, as he dominated a heavily favored Big Red Machine. Now, the 73 NLCS was marred by a fight that broke out in the fifth inning of the third game, beginning with a tussle between Cincinnati's Pete Rose and New York's Rose-Harrelson at the second base. Rose was trying to break up a double play involving Joe Morgan and shit hit the fan. Players from both sides joined in general melee that lasted for several minutes and set off rowdy fan behavior at Shea in New York. Photographs of the fight, autographed by Rose and Harrelson, are now available at a number of internet sites. Now, this was the fifth NLCS in all, and only NLCS between 70 and 80, not to feature the Phillies or the Pirates. In fact, from 69 to 80, the NL East champion was either the Mets, Pirates, or the Phillies. Of course, 69, Mets defeated the Orioles, 73 lost to the A's, Pirates they won in 71 and 79, and of course the Phillies were there in 1980 to win the World Series. So and the Pirates were having a hard time with the Dodgers in that era, and so did the Phillies. Now, the opening game of the series, played at Riverfront, was a very interesting contest because Cincinnati only had 6 hits in the match. The starting pitchers, New York's Tom Seaver and Cincinnati's Jack Billingham, produced a classic pitcher's duel in Game 1. The Mets threatened in the first, loading the bases with 1 out, but Cleon Jones grounded to a double play to end the inning. The Mets scored a lone run in the second when Seaver doubled home Bud Harrelson. He was also in control of a normally potent Cincinnati offense, holding the Reds scoreless through 7 innings. In the 8th, however, Pete Rose homered off Seaver with 1 out, and Seaver yielded another solo homer in the 9th to Johnny Bench to put the Reds over the top. The Reds walked off with a 1-0 advantage in the series, and Tom Seaver's 13 strikeout performance would be later matched by Jacob deGrom in Game 1 of the 2015 NLDS. Now, in Game 2, it was all John Matlack. Just in Game 1, the pitching dominated Game 2, as lefties John Matlack of the Mets and Don Gullett of the Reds were near the top of respective games. A Rusty Staub home run in the 4th was the only run through 8 innings. After Gullett exited for a pinch hitter in the 6th, Clay Carroll shut down the Mets for 3 innings, but New York put the game away with 4 runs in the 9th against Red relievers Tom Hall and the very inconsistent Pedro Bourvon. Matlack concluded his 2-hitter. Reserve outfielder Andy Costco collected both hits in the 2nd and the 7th innings by retiring the Reds 1-2-3 in the 9th. In a post-game interview, the light-hitting Harrelson said, Matlack, made the Big Red Machine look like me hitting today. Now, in a very interesting Game 3, where New York dominated, Jerry Koosman was the big winner against Ross Grimsley. Dennis Menke had a home run for Cincinnati, but it was Rusty Staub that made the whole difference. Now, during the pregame warm-ups of this contest, Harrelson was confronted by Reds second baseman Joe Morgan, who told Harrelson that 73 batting champion, eventual NL MVP Pete Rose, didn't appreciate Harrelson's Game 2 post-game disparaging comments, saying Harrelson was finding more fault with the Reds rather than giving Matlack credit. The Mets scored early and often in Game 3, racing out to a 6-0 lead after 2 innings. Rusty Staub hit his second homer of the series in the first inning, and the Mets erupted for 5 more in the second, highlighted by yet another homer by Staub, a 3-run shot. The Reds scored their runs in the third on a Dennis Menke homer, an RBI single by Joe Morgan off Mets starting pitcher and winner Jerry Koosman. Now in the top of the fifth, with Pete Rose on first, Morgan hit a double play ball to Mets first base with John Milner. Rose slid hard into Harrelson as he tried unsuccessfully to break up the double play. Harrelson had said something to Rose, and Harrelson was always a big mouth, and they began to fight at second as both teams poured onto the field. Order was eventually restored in this hockey-style brawl, and neither Rose nor Harrelson were ejected. But when Rose returned to his left field position at the bottom of the fifth, fans at Shea became showering with debris. Reds manager Sparky Anderson then pulled his team off the field. After a whiskey bottle almost hit Rose, NL President Chub Feeney threatened to force the Mets to declare forfeit unless he could calm the fans. Yogi Berra's Willie Mays, Seaver, Staub, and Cleon Jones walked out to left field and persuaded fans to stop throwing debris. "Look at the scorecard," Willie said. "We're ahead. Let him play the game." The game was finished without any more incidents from either team, and the Mets won to take a 2-1 series lead. Now in the key game 4, Cincinnati was trailing for much of the contest before a late rally in the 12th put them ahead for good. The Reds evened the series behind outstanding pitching and a clutch homer from Pete Rose. The Mets opened the scoring in the third off Red starter Fred Norman, with Felix Millan singing home down home. Norman, with the help of 7 shutout innings from the Reds bullpen, held the Mets to 2 singles for the rest of the game. The Reds tied the game at 7 on a Tony Perez home run, and the Reds had scoring threats in the 10th and 11th, but couldn't score because of 2 outstanding catches by Staub. The latter unfortunately resulted in a severe injury to Staub's right shoulder when he crashed in the right field fence, and it kind of limited him in the Oakland the Mets series later on. Then in the 12th, much of the displeasure of the Shea Stadium crowd hoping for a victory, Rose hit a tie-breaking homer off Mets reliever Harry Parker to give the Reds a 2-0 lead. Pedro Bobo came on to retire the Mets in the bottom of the 12th, the evening series at 2-2. Now, ironically, Game 5 was expected to be a pitcher's duel, but it never transpired. A Game 5 victory gave the Mets their second NL pennant in 5 years, as Seaver pitched the Mets to victory. The Reds loaded the bases in the top of the first, but couldn't score. Then the Mets took the lead in a 2-run single by veteran Ed Kranepool, playing the place of the injured Rusty Staub in the bottom of the inning. Cincinnati tied the game with single runs in the third and fifth on a sac fly by Dan Dreesen and an RBI single by Tony Perez. The Mets then went ahead for good with 4 runs and 4 hits in the fifth, capped by a run-scoring single from Rose-Harrelson. Seaver scored New York's final run in the 6th when he doubled and came home on a Cleon Jones single. Now, Seaver kept the Reds off the board after the 5th, although closer Tug McGraw came on to get the final 2 outs for the save after the Reds had loaded the bases in the 9th. Now, the Mets got just six more hits than the Reds in the series, 37-31, but outscored them 23-8. The Mets hit just .220, but the great New York Mets staff held the hard-hitting Reds to a meager .186 batting average. Unfortunately, NBC had to interrupt his coverage of the game to report the resignation of Vice President Peter Agnew after pleading nolo contendere to corruption charges. This is before, obviously, the 1974 remnants of the Watergate scandal. Now, why did the Mets win this series? And I'll tell you why. The first 4 innings they dominated. They outscored the Reds 14-3. The Reds basically were not the people that they were in the regular season. A lot of the key players didn't really pan out, and Foster was still developing, and the new players, the 72 hangover from the Tolan incident, in Game 7, and some of the other players of the Reds not producing like they should. It was a hard loss for the Reds, but like I said, if you would have played the Oakland A's, it would have been glorious. I think with the Mets, you were just playing as a team, and you peaked at the right time. But put it this way, ladies and gentlemen, I was talking about the Reds starting staff at 77 cost them, that season. But you got Tom Seaver, okay, Jerry Koosman, and John Matlack, very underrated starters, and always they were worth money. And Ross Grimsley was not a big factor, and unfortunately Don Gullett had a tough series, especially in Game 1. And Pete Rose had a lot of key hits, so you take away Pete Rose and Tony Perez, there wasn't much on offense. It's too bad that sometimes the worst team wins, even though they're the hottest team at the time. But 99 wins and not to beat the Mets, it's just bizarre. But as I said, sometimes pitching defense beats hitting. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you're doing here with our Cincinnati Red podcast, I mentioned 73 because I was sure, ladies and gentlemen, my Oakland A's were going to play the Reds. I had the pizzas all set up. The Papa was only a 7, 8 year old kid, but I mean, holy frig. I was salivating thinking, Pete Rose against the A's the second time, and it didn't pan out. When I say the ultimate battle, because the 72 Reds were not as good as the 73 Reds. 73 Reds were starting to build towards a real big red machine. So it would have been the ideal championship series, because Reggie Jackson didn't play in 72. So you see where I'm coming from. The 72 series was not what we expected, because, Reggie not there made a big factor. But 73, Reggie was healthy. Capaneris was, the suspension was taken off, or the pressure from that, it would have been a lot better. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you're doing here with our podcast, like, comment, subscribe, or share. And don't forget, requests are highly accepted and always highly considered. Have a good one. Bye.